If a kid's poor at 3, they're going to be poor at 30, bar none. That's just fact. And so what are you doing about it? And I feel like there's only 2 things in life or within the system that can change intergenerational poverty, right? One is education, right? How do we teach our kids better? And that's obviously there's a whole system around that. And second is work. If you can create stable work, stable wages, stable family, that leads to stable kids, and the kids will live a better life.
Steve's been a great friend to our company. He's very focused on helping to create meaningful, high dignity, purposeful work for people across the United States. And the impact of the SkillUp Coalition is really substantial. So we're excited to learn from Steve today on Untapped with Upsmith about ways to combat the skilled labor crisis. Steve, thanks for joining us.
Awesome. It's my pleasure. Honored to be here. Thank you for allowing the grace of me to come on. So I appreciate it.
Of course. I want to dive right into your story because I've seen your LinkedIn. It's very impressive. I would like you to touch on the things there. But you were telling us a great story about your childhood off camera. So will you go back into that so that everybody listening or watching gets involved?
Sure. My LinkedIn profile is kind of boring, but so let me talk about my childhood. So like Wyatt, my dad grew up at a farm. And I think that farm, probably similar to Wyatt, that formed his beliefs in life, right? And then he went from a farm, went to college, came to the States in his early 20s. And I think that he always talks about like this idea of like success in life is built on this notion of what he calls 80% perspiration and 20% inspiration. I always thought this really interesting. You got to work hard in life. I think that's true. And part of it is Asian culture. Let's be honest about that. But any culture, I think working hard is actually important. But where inspiration comes is actually people have different views on what inspiration means, right? And I think for me, where inspiration drives from is this idea of joy. Like, what is it that brings me joy? Whether it's, a great tiramisu brings me joy, right? Or watching my alma mater win a Sweet 16 game, like, it brings me joy.
Did that just happen?
Right? And so my career transitions, it just happened this past weekend. Well, sort of, right? So what brings me joy is what inspires me. And I think that's been led to some of my career transitions over time, which you can see on LinkedIn, right? Is, some sort of with this notion of what brings me joy. And so family brings me joy. And where I am now, right? Trying to help Americans, measurably and sustainably lift themselves out of poverty, right? Brings me a lot of joy, even though it's challenging as all.
Well, it brings us joy to get a chance to learn from you. So I would love to drill in around, for people that are not familiar, the SkillUp Coalition, its mission, the things that you're investing in. Would you mind giving the 101 for people on your work?
Of course. Yeah, I really appreciate the ability to share a little bit. So SkillUp is a career navigation platform. We like to say, although we're not expert yet, that we're a concierge service for low-wage workers looking to upskill into better jobs. The reason I like that term is that the folks who try to help, they never get concierge, right? They often get non-concierge. And how we try to do it is, I think, probably threefold. Is one, we market only to a particular population, which I think you guys know, which are non-degree workers, low wage, however you want to describe it. That's our core focus area, and that's who we touch exclusively. When they come to the product experience, and when they come, basically it's 3 calls to action. You can search for the right career, you can search for the right training program, or you can search for the right job. And what we've done in the background is we've done a whole lot of homework where we've curated the experience to offer what we think are sort of best fit for purpose for this population. So we're never going to be Indeed, we're never going to be LinkedIn, we're never going to have millions, but we can have on our job catalog, we have several thousand because we've stripped out all the noise in the system where folks can get things that are really viable and actually meet their lifestyle. So I'll give you 2 examples, right? So for example, we have a really good list of training programs. All of them have to be less than 12 months or less than $10,000 because the barriers for folks to try to help are time and money. So you want to strip away the noise and make sure that it's viable. On the job side, all of our jobs don't require a college degree for real. And so the example I gave is, we're partners with Google. Their engineer jobs often don't have a college degree, but the reality is we know is the vast majority have a college degree. So we're not going to put that on there. Even though technically they may not require it, realistically, a SkillUp user will never get it. So we strip those out for things that are really viable. And then last thing I'll say is we offer what we like to call a digital warm hug. Because this notion of getting a high quality can be long and arduous. So how can we use technology to wrap ourselves around you to offer resource connections, guidance, coaching, et cetera, that could help you get to the place you want to go? Because sometimes it can be long and arduous. And obviously we're using some Gen AI tools to do some of that stuff, right? But that's sort of what we think is our special sauce, right? This idea of curation, this idea of digital warm hug, and really focus specifically on this population. So we're not going to boil an ocean, but we can boil what we think is a pretty big lake in a way that hopefully is effective. And we have some decent outcomes, at least to that effect.
That's really, I want a digital warm hug. That sounds so nice. What a great North Star.
Doesn't
Yeah,
it?
I love that.
Steve, would you share a little bit about how you came to the work? What was that process of seeking joy professionally that led to the intersection with SkillUp?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll start from my journey from like the for-profit into nonprofit space. And so, I was in the private sector for many years. And as I sort of worked through that sector, one of the things that I think came up for me that I think is a scourge in this country is this notion of sort of income inequality, the K-shaped economy, and most important for me, intergenerational poverty. That is, if you ask parents, well, what's the most important thing in life, is that for the kid to get better, right? And that's not always true for the population that we care about. In fact, I remember a grantee when I was in philanthropy said, Steve, if a kid's poor at 3, they're going to be poor at 30, bar none. That's just fact. And so what are you doing about it? And I feel like there's only 2 things in life or within the system that can change intergenerational poverty, right? One is education, right? How do we teach our kids better? And that's obviously there's a whole system around that. And second is work. If you can create stable work, stable wages, stable family, that leads to stable kids, and the kids will live a better life. So my transition has been into this world of like, how do we fight intergenerational poverty? And specific in work, I joined SkillUp in part to be a small part, hopefully, of a larger ecosystem that can really provide stability for families across the country so that their kids can be better off than them. And that's what all parents want. So that's what drove me into SkillUp. It's what drove me into philanthropy to begin. And I think it's really important because the data suggests that kids are not doing that well, right? And so we all want them to do better in life. And that's what parents want as well.
That's so good, but heavy. Those are heavy statistics, heavy trends. How do you find, it's kind of White's question again, but I want to go even further. How do you continuously find joy in a really heavy topic and heavy problem that you're trying to solve?
Well, the partners and the folks who are in the system, like you guys, right, bring me joy. Because we're all trying to solve for a really hard problem, but we're doing it, we hope, with intelligence, but also with like grace and humility. Like recognizing that we need to work with each other to do great things, and recognizing that we ourselves can only solve so much, right? So you have to work with others. And so I feel like the vast majority of people I've met in this space come at it with passion, compassion, integrity, and humility. I think those things are really important, and that epitomizes Upsmith, right? So that's what brings me joy, is to be able to solve really hard problems with like-minded people who really don't take themselves too seriously, right? But take the problem really, I know it sounds trite, but I think it's true, and do it with partnership mentality and really with grace and humility. Like, I think that's really important because the problem is really hard. Unless you have some humble attitude towards it, you're just not going to solve it, right? So that's what brings me joy, is really folks like Upsmith.
You're generous to say it.
Very honored. Yes.
But it's transparent and honest.
Well, like I'd love to drill into like more examples that come out of that the coalition's work. So
Sure.
reading the impact report from 2023, and I would encourage anyone interested in the mission that we're on to check it out. We'll put it in the show notes. I mean, the numbers are very impressive. So more than 30,000 people trained across the coalition, more than 10,000 jobs created, 400 million some odd dollars of wage growth, an 80-to-1 return on investment that's being made. What are lessons you're learning about how to be impactful? And what are the trends that come out of that you think are most compelling?
Yeah, I probably don't want to talk about like good numbers, right? I kind of want to touch upon, I think, the challenges, right? And I'll talk about from like a worker perspective, and then I'll talk about it from like the employer data perspective, which I think is pretty much on our ecosystem. Let me start with the latter first. So there's been a lot of research, Burning Glass has put some stuff out, right, around this notion of non-degree jobs, jobs without college degree, are largely filled with folks with college degrees, right? That just came out fairly recently. And there's other data that suggests that the whole skills-based movement is largely on the periphery of actually really making impact. And so I think about that from a SkillUp perspective, like worker voice. We were lucky to have a survey panel of 5,000 SkillUp users, which is a lot that we can survey regularly to get their pulse, right, on what they feel about the labor dynamics of the marketplace. And what they're telling us, I think, resonates with what the data is telling us. It's frustrating. It's a struggle. And that the vast majority of folks that we're helping, it takes a while, right, for them to be able to get something that's meaningful. They tell us they need support, right, to be able to get across the finish line. But they tell us that they respect someone who's got their back, right? This idea of like a digital warm hug that I mentioned, right? Like we're going to continue to push, right, for change. And I think they respect that someone, at least digitally, has their back, just like you guys have the back of the workers that year. So I think a lot of it comes down to like this idea of trust, right? Integrity, you say what you mean, mean what you say kind of stuff. And, we're very transparent what we do, and we're surface up all the challenges that we have and all the things we don't do well. But I feel like the labor market is very interesting. We'll get more into that, where I think what workers are telling us resonates with what the data suggests around skills-based hiring. And what I think is good is that there are folks like you guys who are trying to solve for the problem with grace and humility. And that's what gives me joy to try to figure some of this stuff out, because it's not giving joy in many ways for the workers we care.
We look at a lot of labor data, and right now the numbers are hard to make sense of.
Yeah.
Unemployment rates are as low as they've been in a long time. In many cases, sub 4%. At the same time, you have over 1 million openings in U.S. manufacturing and construction. It's even higher when you layer out other parts of the economy, as many as 9 million openings in the U.S. right now. And there's 15 million people on the sidelines. And so how do you make sense of that, and what's the story underneath it?
Yeah, I don't have a great answer, Ryan, Alex, to be honest with you. I wonder whether, from the employer side, if there's not enough of a competitive reason, right, to take people from the sideline, right? Whether they're doing well enough, right, that they don't need to fill some slots, even though they have those job openings. Otherwise, labor economics would suggest, right, that they would hire some folks. But there must be a business reason why that. So I don't know if the competitive pressures are strong enough. I also think that when people do hire, that they're stealing from Peter the Paintball. That is, they're taking a college degree holder, many who are looking for a job, right, and hiring those folks because there are enough of them around to hire, as opposed to hiring folks without a college degree. So you basically doing a swap of college degree holders from one company. I think that's actually happening, right? And so, I don't have a great answer on this, but I feel like, one, the competitive pressures probably aren't strong enough. And two, I do think there's a swap thing going on. And hence the folks who are trying to help, they are caught in the middle. They're caught between SkillUp and Charybdis, and they need folks like Upsmith, right, to be able to take them from SkillUp into Charybdis, right? And they need folks like SkillUp to do that. Otherwise, they're going to be stuck in this sort of this mire, right, of what I think is happening in the labor market.
I love a Greek mythology reference. Let's go. I'm like, wait, what? Charybdis who? Okay, great. Done. I'm good for the day. Not that what we're talking about is good, but
I think it's very insightful. Particularly when you layer on the point you made around how you look at people's underlying skills. What are the competencies that they show? How do those competencies map to credentials? How does the credential unlock very productive work? You're partnering with all sorts of companies who are working on this problem. I'm curious about like a story of a person impacted that jumps out that cuts against some of the dynamics you just alluded to. People that you can point to as wins.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. We have a partnership with Amazon, and they hiring warehouse workers. So the person that we were dealing with, what I think is interesting, is that her incentive structure is pinned in part on hiring non-degree workers, and that's built into an incentive. But that's interesting, right? Because I think without that incentive structure, what happens is inertia kicks in, right? So this idea of, we're going to do things the same old way. And there are enough degree holders where inertia can win the day. But when you have an incentive structure that can buttress against inertia, then you might have something. But having that kind of incentive structure is really hard to do. And obviously the vast majority of companies don't have that. So that to me is a win, but I think it's a win that is very much a unicorn win. That is being able to replicate, I think, is really, really hard. And so this is why I think you see some of the data that out there from Burning Glass, because incentives matter a lot, as we all know, and the structures aren't built enough to overcome the inertia of what's happened historically. And I think unless you do that, we're going to be in the same situation with our grandkids. Like, I actually really believe that, right? And I don't know what's going to what's the foresee mechanism. I'll share a story. I was in Arkansas for a SHRM conference. And SHRM put up interesting data that said something like 90% of employers really want to do skills-based hiring. And yet only like 15% actually really do. And so I raised my hand and I was like, well, what about the set like, what's the forcing mechanism for the other 75%? And I got not a good answer. In fact, I got no answer. Right? So I wonder with that 75%, like, what's the forcing mechanism? And I struggle with that, to be honest.
So for those not aware, SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, they're having a conference. They're talking about what leads to those outcomes. I go back to the Amazon case study you shared. What are the incentives for that person who's making a decision to hire non-degree based workers?
Yeah, her bonus is pegged in part to how many folks she hires that are non-degree holders or non-traditional hires, and that matters. Right. And so that leads to interesting conversations. It leads to, real and meaningful impact because she drives that with her team. Like, her team is incentivized, right, to do the same. And I think, but it's the only incentive structure that I think I've really seen that actually drives towards really, to some level, hiring non-degree workers. And I don't know why Amazon did it, but in this one case they did. And I just wonder whether other companies can take some of that approach, but otherwise, why would you do it?
Yeah.
Like, if I'm working for a company, like, what's going to drive my incentives?
Let's keep talking about it. So conceivably, there's something in it for Amazon too that's motivating why they would create that structure. So what do you think Amazon's logic is around building that system?
Yeah, they need workers, right, to fill the warehouses, right? And I think that's true. So but the question is like, well, what about a FedEx? And what about a UPS, right, kind of thing? I feel like, some of those folks they're hiring seasonal, they are hiring non-degree workers, but, typically they're relatively low-level jobs. For the Amazons, there are some low-level jobs, but there are some jobs that are actually really poised for success where wages are actually pretty high. That's built into incentive structure. And so what I don't want to do is I don't want to send a SkillUp user into another low-level job, right? I want to put them in a job that actually has trajectory for the future. And I think for some of the Amazon roles, there are. Like, you can go to the warehouse and then you can take advantage of their education benefits, right, which are really strong. And so I think that's a tipping point for us. Like, get the job and you can have education benefits with an incentive structure that allows folks to get hired. I just haven't seen that type of structure, right, in other companies. But I think I might be missing something. Why not? So maybe there are other companies that have some similar structures. I would love to see that. because then we can think about partnering with them. I just haven't seen it at scale.
Yeah, we're serving a lot of skilled trades companies at Upsmith who know that there is work to go capture if they have ready talent to go capture it. And that's in an environment where, jobs are getting more scarce. Certainly every lead matters, and they're investing really heavily in those leads. And so it's important that the human being that dispatches to that person's home to serve them does so in a really extraordinary way. But then you drill in and like what makes extraordinary service, it's things like listening and communication, and they're the skills that show up regardless of someone's educational credentials, that if you screen on, can really unlock extreme productivity because it's aligning the right person in the right seat at the right time.
That's right. I would say part of that why I'm going back to my, as I said, this idea of perspiration and inspiration. Like sometimes you have to perspire, and perspiring means like some of these like durable skills, right, that apply to any role. I think are really, 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 really important. And I think that's what you guys and us you're able to unlock, right? You unlock, right, for employers, workers who have the mindset and the behaviors and the skills, right, to be able to succeed. That's a very hard combination. And you guys do it brilliantly. That's what we're trying to do, right, at some level of scale. It's really difficult. It's really, really hard. And it's hard to convince employers to take some level of risk on that. But you guys do it brilliantly.
Would love to keep ragging on great employers. So other employers you're working with who you do think are really good, emblematic leaders here, who would you call out?
I call Verizon. We have a really good relationship with them. It's part of what we call our Earn and Learn program, where sometimes, especially for youth, we're serving more and more youth. Sometimes you just need that sort of entry-level job, right? Now, I will say all of our jobs pay at least living wage, right, based on the MIT living wage calculator. So it's not just any job, it's living wage. But what's important for a company like Verizon is that, just like many other companies, they have education benefits. So if we can get them in the door, then we try to work with our user to take advantage of those benefits from Verizon so they can upskill on the company's dime, right? So Verizon is a great partner of ours. We have a solar power company called Sunrun, who does some really amazing work on this. And I think, sometimes it's hard. You don't know where a user is in his or her life, right? And so we do our best to either get them a great job, if that's possible, but sometimes it's not possible. Sometimes, especially if you have to get that this idea of like a gateway job, right? Start somewhere and then take advantage as best you can to upskill. But then then more part of what we're having the digital warm hug is once you get in, how can we push you, right? To then take advantage of those things, because sometimes those things slip by the wayside just because life happens sometimes.
Yep.
Right? And so that stuff is really important for us. It's like this idea of like a warm
I love it.
hug.
So you just mentioned two really important macro needs for the country. One of them around broadband and broadband expansion, and the Verizon's a massive leader.
Yes.
And a second around the electrification transition and how we think about people with the right skills to help power where we get our sources of energy.
Yeah.
So I'd love to learn from you about both. So on the first one, right now we have so few people that have the right skills to be able to both install new broadband lines and fiber, to then think through the connectivity for that. There's a low voltage cabling problem to be solved. A leader like Verizon has lots of capacity. They also operate through a lot of subcontractors in every market they serve. How are they thinking about it? What's their strategy? How are you seeing it play out?
It's a good question. I don't know. I don't know exactly how Verizon's thinking about it, but what I do know is that they need cablers, right? They need installers. They need, because as you mentioned, the need is vast. And so, I think what they need in broadband, this idea of mutual benefit, is workers who are ready, willing, and able. And I think this idea of willing is just as important as ready and able. So the willingness comes in where people have the proclivity to say, you know what, I'm going to do a good job of this. Now, they have to be ready and able at the same time. But I feel like for companies like Verizon, sometimes because turnover is a big deal, this idea of willingness and mindset and behavior is really important. And I think that's what's been, I think important to our relationship is that we're hopefully bringing workers who have the willingness part to really sort of be on time, right? Some of the things that we talk about in durable skills, and also have the ability to do the job. So from my side of Verizon, it's the idea of like willingness is important than anything else. On the solar panel, I think it's the same thing on the solar panel stuff. Is that, again, ready, willing, and able. This idea, it's a hard job. It's actually really hard. And so if you have the mindset that I'm going to do it, I can do the job well, I can make a decent living, and this is a job that it's not going to go away down the road. And so I think both for Verizon and Sunrun, these jobs aren't going away. They'll be around for decades, if not centuries. And so I think that also sort of feeds into all this. So that's my sense of those two companies. Why?
There's a lot to learn from both. Kudos to the teams that you're partnering with for leaning in and innovating on it. That's awesome.
There is.
I want to know a story, Steve, that jumps out to you. One of your favorite stories about an individual who SkillUp has helped place in one of these upper mobility jobs. Like who, you don't have to say names, but who's someone that comes to mind with a great story?
Yeah, I'll tell you, we do have a lot of stories. I think the ones that come up most to me, I mentioned earlier this notion of intergenerational poverty. Like that's been something that's driven me for the past, 15 years or so. And the stories I hear about how the kids are doing better really resonate with me. And so we've had a few stories where we've been able to get a decent job for folks. And it's like, my kids, they're doing the homework, right? They're on their screens less, right? Yeah. They're doing better in school. Like that gives joy to a parent. And so it's not just about the job itself. It's about how does that job translate into family. And those are the stories that most resonate with me is the impact on family as much as individual, particularly when it comes to kids, right? And we've had several stories, quite a few stories about that, about the impact on kids. And my hope is that when these kids become adults, that they're better off than their parents. And I think that will be the case. And those are the stories that most resonate with me, is the future of our country based on what we're doing now.
That's awesome. There's a lot of joy in that work. There's a lot of joy in that work.
There's a lot of joy in that work, right? And nothing gives me more joy, right, than buttressing what someone used to tell me when I was in philanthropy. If you're poor at 3, you're gonna be poor at 30. That's what she said, and she's right. I want to flip that dynamic, Wyatt and Alex, right? I want to use a different term, right? That's my goal. I'll never accomplish it, but that's what gives me joy.
That's a hard stat or phrase. I don't like
it either.
I'm glad we have people like you working on that.
And vice versa.
Oy.
It's a big mission. Let's do our lightning round. There's some questions we love asking our guests to learn from them. And it starts with something that for people that spend a lot of time in libraries is a really good question to pose.
Yes. Thank you for the tee up, Wyatt. We want your book recommendations. You
can
see
book recommendations.
About not even a tenth of my collection behind me right now. I love a book rec.
And as you know, Steve, we're very focused on using our software to help influence behavior. And so we're super interested in a book that's changed your behavior in some way. So like after you read it, you had a different perspective on things and there was some change in your life that you made as a result.
Recommendation? Can I flip the script a little bit?
Our first song.
Right, so
yes.
The book is a business book. You guys have probably read it. Good to Great, right, by Jim Collins. I read that at business school. That sort of changed how I thought about how great companies. And if you think about the thing that the one line I remember is like great leaders. It's a window mirror, or the mirror window. When things are going really well, they never look in the mirror, they look outside the window for the team, right? But when things are going badly, they look in the mirror, they never look outside the window. That's always resonated with me. To me, that's a sign of a great leader. It's the humility to say, things are going great, let's thank the team. things are going bad, you point at yourself. So that really resonated with me when I was younger. So here's a song recommendation. When I was young, I remember I was played basketball the other day, right? On the basketball court with the boom box. Boom box. You're probably too young to remember the boom box, right? And all of a sudden the song came on, which was like, holy crap. The song Smells Like Teen Spirit, right? And so I'm like, what is going on with my life? And so I run home, right? And I turn the MTV on back in the day. And I just sit there and all of a sudden the song comes up and I'm like watching Kurt like doing his thing, flowing hair. And the first thing I thought about is like, you know what? He's different. He's a different dude. And you know what? I think it's okay to be different. And if you know anything about the Asian culture, being different is really hard. Because there are norms and there's culture and there's strictures and parents' expectations, all that kind of stuff, right? And I lived much of my life on those expectations. But I always thought it's cool to be different. And so, you know, I was a corporate lawyer for a little while. I had left, right, to do a startup thing. I was in consulting. I left to do philanthropy because I felt like it was okay to be different, do something different. And it all comes from that song. Like, I believe it or not, that song like literally changed my life because it's okay to be different. And I was like, you know, I was a young kid at the time. So the book is Good to Great, and the song It Smells Like Teen has literally transformed my life. Honestly, I'm not sure I would be here sitting with you amazing folks if it wasn't for Kurt Cobain. I can trace it back to Kurt Cobain. I kid you not. That's just a true story. True story.
And an influential figure.
Indeed.
No doubt.
So something for me.
And very specifically. That's great. That's our first song rec. Maybe that becomes part of our curriculum. Wyatt. I don't know. One of our favorite questions in our not so lightning round is, what is something you'd go back and tell, you know, let's say your 16-year-old self? And then I like to add, what is something that you think your 95-year-old self would tell you?
Okay. The 16-year-old self, I'd probably say two things. One, I'm going to go back to basketball because I'm a basketball man, right? I remember Larry Bird, who I just adored when I was young. He said he knew when he was good when the game slowed down for him, right? Because basketball can be very frenetic. And when the game slowed down, everything became easier for him. And Larry Bird, right? Most people can't do that. And the reason I said that is for 16-year-olds, right? Take it slowly, right? You're not going to change the world at 16, right? Learn, be curious, do different things in life, take it slowly. Ultimately, you'll get to a place at some point where joy happens, right? But take it slowly. But the other thing I'll say at the same time, just may sound contrary, is take some risks, right? Because when you're 16 to 25, right, you can take risks. And I remember, I'll share another story with you guys. I was going from a corporate lawyer to the startup, and I was struggling because, my parents were like, hey, you're an Asian kid, right? Don't do that, right? Kind of thing. And others were saying, I talked to a law partner, right? I was like, Steve, you would be a freaking idiot, like, not to try. You're like 23, 24, like, what are you doing? Like, try. If it doesn't work, you can always go back into something, right? I was like, oh, that's the kind of mentor I need, like, take some risk, right? So I would say, take it slowly, right? But take some risk at the same time. My 95-year-old self would probably say, and this is something I struggle with personally, which is this idea of how can I best say it? Like the personal lives that we lead, and our relationships matter a whole lot more than anything else, right? And what I struggle with saying that because I accuse myself of being too involved with work, right? And again, I feel like that's my Asian culture. Like, I don't know, like Asian culture is weird, man. Like it's just, it's heavy and it's always in there.
American culture.
Maybe American
There's a lot of
culture.
cultures, I think,
American
that are a
culture,
little
right?
workaholic.
But I struggle, right? I say it's like breaking apart from that and to having like meaningful relationships. And it's a struggle. And my 95-year-old self would say to me now, break apart from that. Like, other things matter much more. But I'll be honest, it's hard. It's hard to break away from that. And so I think that's what 95-year-old, I just need to listen to my 95-year-old self, Alex, to be honest.
Listen, my 95-year-old self has me out here doing all kinds of risks, even well past
All right,
25.
good.
So I don't
That's
know.
good.
I like that. I appreciate you sharing that, though. I have struggled with that and still do sometimes. And I think that's very real, especially when you're on mission for something so big. Wyatt and I were just talking about, in some ways when you're up against a massive problem that you're trying to solve, there's endless work
That is true.
to do. And
That
so
is true.
how do you, I don't know about the word balance, but how do you do it all? How do you still have relationships? So,
Yeah. I go back to Larry
appreciate
Bird. Make the game slow down. So when things slow down, then you can see, like Larry Bird, you can see the periphery. Like he had eyes in the back of his head. Like I really believe so. And so for me, like the eyes are like, family relationships in the back. I just need to make sure that I slow down. And I'm not quite there yet, to be honest.
Any productivity hacks?
Oh, that's such a good question. You know what I really like? Have you guys used Loom, the video platform? I really like it. The reason I like one, it's easy to use, but I like it because when you send a Loom video, it's just different. Like people are expecting something, their email or whatever, text, whatever. It's just different. And it just takes a second or two, right? You say a few words, right, over a minute, and you can convey a lot through facial expressions, right, and how you make your tone, all that kind of stuff. You just can't get right via email or even text or even on the phone because you're visually there with my ugly mug, right? And so I really like Loom. I use Loom a lot. Like in fact, I'm gonna start using it with you guys. Rather than send email, I'm gonna Loom you guys and say, hey, Wyatt and Alex, this is what I need, but I'll send a video Loom. So that's
I'm for
that's my
it.
hack, if you will.
I love it.
All right, cool.
I'll loom with you anytime,
Let's do it.
Steve.
Let's do
We'll
it.
loom back and forth. Yeah. If you're giving advice to an owner of a small business out there that's trying to overcome this labor shortage,
Cool.
and they're thinking through the best way to do it, what would be your counsel?
I'd say one, there's a lot of awesome talent out there. And there's a lot of awesome talent that's being trained and supported by awesome organizations out across the country, like Upsmith and like others. That's a message that often falls on deaf ears, right? And so the second message I would say, because I feel like sometimes folks need to take a risk. Like I feel like this idea of like a risk is, take a calculated risk, if you want to call it that, because nothing in life's going to be perfect, right? Maybe you've never hired a non-degree holder before, but I'm telling you, Upsmiths of the world are providing awesome talent, right? That's going to be ready, willing, and able. Take that, a calculated risk. Don't take a risk. Take a calculated risk, because the end result is going to be something really positive. And here's the data from Upsmith that says that the risk is worth it. So take a calculated risk with us. We'll be there. We'll be your partner hand in hand. Like we're not going to go away, and we're going to do this with mutual benefit in mind, right? So if it's not working, it's not mutually beneficial for you, then you let us know and we'll change. And so that's what I would say. Calculated risk. One, there's talent out there. Take a calculated risk. We'll do it with mutual benefit, and we will be supportive in your efforts to hire folks that might be different than who you typically hire.
That's good. I need about 2 more hours because I have 27 million additional questions. Okay, one more in our quote lightning
Sure.
round, because we haven't actually gotten this with anyone else yet. Do you have a morning routine? Because I am all up in arms about the conversation about morning routines. So yes or no, and if so, what is it and does it work?
I do, but it's really boring. Like I get up, I drink coffee, I check in. I do work out most days, right? So everyone does. It's nothing new, right? I'm trying to say like what's.
Everyone does not. Everyone does not.
Can I share one thing that I do which might be unique? Is that in the past like 30 or 40 years, in my opinion, there have been 3 mediums of art that have stood above the rest. One is the wire, like the wire. Second is Nirvana. We talked about that. And third is Calvin and Hobbes. Okay? Calvin Hobbes is one of the greatest things of all time. And so one thing I do every morning, Alex, is I read a Calvin Hobbes strip. Because it brings me joy. This idea of a 6-year-old, this pet tiger, being snarky and just like trying to convince his parents to do, I don't know, evil things, or trying to convince his babysitter or his babysitter's boyfriend that he should not date the babysitter. It's just pure gold, right? It brings me joy. And so I do read the Calvin and strip, one strip. By the way, it's one of the hardest to, like, I think about people who do amazing. The idea of creating joy and laughter in 4 strips is like the most difficult thing I can imagine to do, right? And it is the most amazing, and just I can't speak more highly of it.
We've come full circle. Now I fully understand how you are tapped into joy every day.
Calvin Hobbes,
Because
yes.
of your morning routine
Yes.
that involves
Yes,
Calvin
it does.
Hobbes.
It does.
No further questions, Your Honor. What have you?
We've untapped with Upsmith the secret.
Mm-hmm.
Steve has it. That's it. Steve, thank you for your friendship for us. Thank you for being such an encouraging partner in the work. We're grateful to be part of the coalition and
Likewise,
excited for all the
thank you
things
for
that are
all
still
the great
ahead.
work you guys do. I'm honored to be on this podcast. I'm honored to be your, hopefully, friends and colleagues. And more to come on bringing joy into people's lives. So thank you both.